Well, hello. Welcome back. You may recall that in the last video that I put out there, the most recent one, we talked about the 4 levels of development. Remember, we talked about give me, use me, search me, and make me. And the second level of use me, I mentioned to you, sounded good on the surface, but it really entailed a negative aspect of it for managers and for people trying to do things in today's environment. Because the negative part of it is, it's not that they want to use me to make an impact, but they want all the attention on themselves. They want to be seen as the person that did that. And I mentioned to you in that video that true leaders break free of that and move to the next 2 levels. That boils down to one neuroscience aspect that I want to just call your attention to today. And that is this aspect of the fact that when you look at neuroscience, the nerves release certain chemicals to make us experience and feel certain things based on our experience at the time. And the one I want to call your attention to today is this aspect of reward, this aspect of feeling reward, feeling like I accomplished something. And people, basically when the brain senses that, it releases, and the nerves release dopamine as a chemical. And dopamine, there's a term that people refer to it sometimes as the dopamine fix. And dopamine is strong because it makes us feel rewarded, like we want to show our muscles and all of that sort of stuff. And we want applause for what we did. It can be called the dopamine fix. True leaders break free and are not limited by the dopamine fix, because it can be a bad thing if all you're trying to do is call the attention on yourself. And it can limit your results if you're doing that, because once you get a little first positive thing, it's like, oh yeah, I'm there. Maybe not. It is very interesting. And when you look at a society that is generally very narcissistic, that can really make that a bigger problem. It can aggravate the problem that can be. You can see this in sales a lot of times when somebody, it's not important that I am who I am. It's only important whether I can convince you that I'm such and such. That's another sort of part of that. So we have to be careful of that. When you talk about true leaders, they break free of that as a limitation. I'll give you 2 real quick stories, and these were actually with youth that I was working with, but they both kind of display the aspect that we're talking about here. One young gentleman, for about a week back in around the 2001 time frame, I was out in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was going through a week where twice a day I would get in an open cockpit biplane, Great Lakes, and a pit special, and I would go up and do aerobatics twice a day for 5 days. Just a lot of fun at that particular time. And it was sort of interesting because the family that I stayed with, they had 2 sons. One of them was an avid baseball player, just an avid baseball player. He loved Little League. He loved everything about baseball. The other one was an avid aviator. He just loved airplanes and everything about them. Well, their father was a nuclear engineer, and he basically worked at a high-level position at a nuclear power facility out in the Phoenix area there. And this one particular day, the father was sitting at a bar stool that was at kind of the bar counter, if you will, in their home, in their kitchen. And I was sitting at the kitchen table. And that son walked up to me and he goes, "Hey, Randy, can I share an idea of mine with you?" And I said, "Sure, buddy." And I just kind of looked down like this, and he laid down a piece of paper and he said, "It's an idea for designing a spacecraft that works on steam." And like most of you, when you hear that, inside of me, everything in me just wanted to go, yeah, right, kind of, no way, all this kind of stuff. I didn't do that, because what I realized is that there was a bigger need here. What I did is I sat there and said, "Well, show it to me, buddy." And he laid it out. He said, "Hey, here's where the water's going to be. Here's where the fire is. Here's where the steam's going to go," and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of him doing that, I said, "Well, you know what, buddy? It's a start. You may find that as you think about it, you have to change it a number of times. You may have to adapt it, modify it quite a bit. But it's a start. It's something to look at." And he just walked away with a beaming face that at least somebody applauded him for thinking anyway. And it was sort of interesting because when his dad when he walked away, his dad looked at me and he just kind of smiled, and we both chuckled when he said this, but he said, "You were a lot nicer than I would have been." And I just looked at him, I said, "Yeah, well, I realized there was a big possibility here." And he realized what I had done and was appreciative of it. The other son was, I was sitting at the kitchen table one day, and the son was sitting across from me, and he was just sitting there like this. It was obvious that he was just beat down and defeated and just couldn't even think. And I looked over and I said, "What's wrong, buddy?" And he looked at me and he said, "I don't get this, my homework." I said, "Really? What do you have to do for homework?" And it was mathematical word problems. And I said, "What don't you understand?" And he said, "Well, this one problem." And I said, "Tell me about it." And it was a problem where, amazingly enough, a baseball player had come up, and out of a certain number of times up, he got a certain number of hits. I said, "Well, what's the problem asking for?" He said, "They're requiring to get the batting average." And I said, "How do you do that?" I said, "What's your problem? How do you do that?" And he said, "Well, I don't know whether it's this divided by this or this divided by that." And I said, "You're a baseball player, aren't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "So what do you think it would be?" He said, "Well, I don't know whether it's this over that or the opposite." And I looked at him and I simply said, "Well, let me ask you this. Can you ever have a batting average greater than 1? And he sat back like this and he went, "No." I said, "Could you at all?" He said, "No." And I said, "So which is it? What do you divide by what?" And he looked down at his paper and he got this kind of partial smile on his face, and he kind of went, "Well, I guess it has to be that divided by that." And I go, "There you go." I said, "See, you knew it. You didn't need somebody to tell you the answer." What I learned was, about 2 years later, this young man won a mathematics award in his school because somebody didn't just narcissistically tell him the answer. I didn't kick into the dopamine fix of, "Hey, I'll tell you." I helped coach him. I helped ask him some questions to get him thinking. And he realized he had it within himself already. So the thing I want to kind of throw out to you today, and it dovetails off of those 4 levels of development. As a leader, don't ever allow yourself to get stuck at that use me level. Look at what it's going to take to make a real difference in other people's lives, whether you get the credit or not. Because whether you get the credit or not is irrelevant. The impact that you're having is what it's all about. So look around your organization this week. Do you see people that are trying to call all the attention to themselves, or do you see people really kind of helping each other? Because I will tell you this, that when you talk about going forward in life, in your organization, in a changing environment, it's going to be that second part of it that is so needed. Because people have a lot more in them than you realize. If your whole attention is on yourself and you're always telling them and talking at them, guess what? You're not bringing out what's already within them. So I leave that with you for this week.